everybody. I am Marina and I'm your host at UNBOSSED. UNBOSSED is a podcast I've created to highlight women with amazing paths of success here in Chicago. Last year, I set out to interview the only 40 female CTOs in the city, and this year I've expanded to female CEOs and women in politics and government in Chicago. I'm excited to share these interviews with you, and I hope you contact me at www.unbossed.io or email me at marina@unbossed.io. Hope to see you soon.
Danielle DuMerer is VP of Technology at Shed Aquarium and lecturer at the Harris School of Public Policy at the University of Chicago. She's also held a role as the CIO and Commissioner of the City of Chicago's Department of Innovation and Technology, where she worked to improve how residents interact with government and leading the smart city initiatives. She brings over 10 years of government technology experience and generally public sector technology experience. And prior to working in government, Danielle developed a K-12 educational technology products at McGraw-Hill companies. Welcome, Danielle.
Hey everybody, this is Marina, your podcast host at UNBOSSED. Today, I'm having a conversation with Danielle DuMerer. She is VP of Technology at Shed Aquarium. Welcome, Danielle.
Hi, great to be here.
By the way, did I say your last name correctly?
It's pretty close. It's DuMerer.
DuMerer.
It's a hard one.
Somebody corrected me, and it's totally live, and I'm gonna leave it in here because sometimes it's kind of like between my accent and my background. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, so thank you.
Yeah, of course.
How are you doing? How is life at home?
Things are good. It's sunny outside today, so that always makes a huge difference to me. I love to be able to bask in the sunshine. Anytime I have the ability to be in sunshine or water, I find it just really renewing. So today is a good day.
Nice, thank you. And before I ask you, the first question is kind of always takes you back. I'll give you a heads up. It takes you back to like, what was Danielle growing up? What was the girl, right? Versus now, the woman. Anything, how has Shed been doing with the pandemic? I just want to check in because I know it's been a hard time for everybody, but Shed is really an iconic, institution for Chicago. And so I just want to check in and see, how are you guys doing?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So we are open. We've been open since January. We were open also between last July and the end of November. So we have had a couple of closures. We were closed about 200 days in total. So the pandemic's had an economic impact on Shed, but we're excited to welcome people. We have, stringent practices in place to give people a fun and safe visit. We've also rolled out other ways to engage with nature. You can access virtual encounters, so you can meet one of our famous penguins or get eye to eye with our sharks and wild reef online as well. So we've had a number of different ways that people can continue to engage with us, and technology has been really critical to helping to make that happen.
Nice.
And like most organizations, we had plans in place, I think, to really be able to expand our audiences, but the pandemic accelerated that for us and really, allowed us to open our doors up virtually more than we ever had before through the delivery of those virtual programs, through online summer camps, through virtual field trips with schools. So we continue to deliver on our mission online.
Nice, beautiful, and we can definitely dig into this a little bit. By the way, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it's like a silly question, but I'm gonna go for it anyways. There was a rumor that cats at some point could catch COVID. Did you guys see any effects of the pandemic on the animals that shed?
No, we did not, but our staff has been incredibly careful. Throughout, we've been a hybrid workforce since the beginning of the pandemic. While
Nice.
some of us worked from home, some of us were essential staff that had to be on
Yeah.
site to take care of our animals and take care of the facility. But we have a great animal health team, a great animal care team, that was really paying attention to strict measures with masking and distancing and taking all the precautions, making sure to stay abreast of all the literature and the science. And so our animals have been safe throughout the pandemic, as have our staff and guests.
Beautiful. Amazing.
Yeah,
Well, nice to hear. I'm glad
yeah.
it didn't, spread or things like that. All right, I'm gonna take you back. Danielle, growing up, did you ever think you would become VP of Technology? And by the way, many you've held a number of roles that I truly admire. Like you were CIO for the city of Chicago. Am I correct saying that? Yeah,
Yes.
CIO and commissioner, which I don't know what it is. You'll tell me later. Of the city of Chicago. But did you ever think you would be a woman in tech?
No, I didn't.
Because
If you would have
you went to school for.
So my undergraduate degree was in English literature and creative writing.
Yes.
Yeah, so and I did a supporting coursework in education, in publishing. So I grew up as a avid reader. I from a very early time wanted to write, and so I think I had a number of different incarnations. And considered being a journalist. I was editor in chief of my high school newspaper, so I
Wow.
was really, I think I love the idea of the role of journalism as a really important check and balance on our democracy, and using, uncovering information and using that to keep your electorate informed. And so that was really enticing to me. But I also loved creating, beautiful works, right? So the idea of writing poetry and writing stories that were meaningful were, also spoke to me. So I did those things, um, but some of them, I had various professors who cautioned against some of those paths for various reasons.
Tell me,
Um,
tell me a few reasons.
Yeah, so on the publishing, the journalism side, talked a little bit about just the challenges of working as a journalist. Just,
As a
you know,
woman?
yeah, not just as a woman, but just in general, just
Okay,
the pay,
got it.
freelance work, right? Not necessarily having access to steady benefits.
Mm,
Just, I think really making sure we understood what the lifestyle might be like.
mhm,
And then on the English literature side, I know I had a professor who taught creative writing who would say that a Master of Fine Arts in creative writing and a $1.50 will get you on a subway. Clearly, we've had some inflation in subway prices since then. But this idea that it's great to pursue, but may not be the most pragmatic choice for everyone. And then on the idea of going into being like teaching literature, being a professor, there was a lot of competition there. There are a number of PhDs and fewer positions as professor, tenured professors in the academic space. And so there are all of these challenges. And as creative as I think I like to be, I also have this very logical and pragmatic side, which
mhm,
probably starts to get us to my turn towards technology, the marriage of both of those sides. But I had used, I had worked in a library when I was in high school, and
mhm,
then while I was an undergraduate, I used archives for the first time.
mhm,
And I, really hadn't thought about them ever. So this idea that there would be sort of primary source material, like people's actual letters, their first manuscripts, the physical objects that belong to certain writers that you would be able to have access to, was really interesting to me. but also problematic that most people don't know that you can access those things. And
Mm,
it's really, um, it's not accessible to most people. And so I was really intrigued by that idea, and so I went to the University of Maryland to study in their archives program. So I
mm,
got my master in library and information science, and while I was
yes,
there, just this idea of promoting, both preservation of and access to information more equitably really just resonated with me. And then I also had the first real exposure to technology that was meaningful. Because I should say, as an undergraduate, I had taken a couple of tech classes, and they didn't speak to me the way they were taught, a more traditional computer science
mm,
course.
yeah,
But at the University of Maryland, they had a human computer interaction program, and the way that they approached technology was always very people centered,
yes,
right? It's about your user, and it's about creating access to that information in a way that's easy and accessible. And so that was when I was really got excited about technology and what we could do with technology,
nice.
and then that sort of took me
Yeah,
into this
a whole
direction.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
let's see. You worked for the University of Maryland, probably while you were there, right?
Yes, I worked in
And
our
then
preservation department.
came back to Chicago. Um,
Mhm.
and you were still in the library and archive uh, uh, industry, if you will. Um, I was very smooth transition to McGraw Hill, which is like I can totally see like they're all about distributing information. Um, I supervised a technology editor, and then moved into the city of Chicago. I guess I want to know now that you know about the stigma of women in technology, and you've been in the industry for a long time. Like, I mean, nowadays, like, women walk into the industry knowing what there is to know, right? But you've kind of like progressed kind of into it. And now that you know, looking back, how was your experience as a woman in tech?
Well, I think I was really fortunate in my early roles to be um, surrounded by a lot of other women. So both libraries and archives, as well as educational technology and educational publishing, does have a lot of women. So I had a lot of very supportive managers and mentors who, when I had an idea, they let me run with it and really encouraged me to build my skills, and didn't question whether or not I was capable. Right? Just empowered me, which was amazing. So when I got into situations that were more traditional tech, I think I was a little surprised at first
Mm-hmm.
because I hadn't had that experience yet, but I did feel questioned often. You would
Mm-hmm.
get people who would question, how much did I know and understand technically? I would have, certain people try to explain things to me that I already knew. And perhaps because I had been empowered earlier on by these strong women, I often didn't have a problem speaking up and saying, I know what a firewall rule is. You don't have to explain that to me.
Nice. What?
And so,
Yeah.
I while it could be challenging and annoying, like I said, I feel really fortunate to have had at sort of a critical points in my career those kinds of mentors who did empower me, because then I felt a little surer in my shoes to be able to handle those situations. But and as I saw others sometimes encounter those situations, I also didn't have a problem speaking up on their behalf, right? To call someone out on doing something similar when if I saw someone doing that to one of my fellow female colleagues.
Yeah. Beautiful. How did you handle, because it happens often that people specifically question my technical abilities. I think like I'm not going to speak for them, but I don't know why specifically, but like having been questioned multiple times about whether I can comprehend or understand the technicalities of a specific solution. How do you handle those scenarios? And this is for my own personal total building. So help me out, please.
I try not to be shy about saying, yes, I understand, and then potentially articulating something to demonstrate the fact that I do in fact understand, in order to redirect the conversation to what we need to be focusing on. Does it work perfectly all the time? No, it's going to depend on who's in the room with you, right? There's probably times where I may have, because someone could have been at a higher level, I may have held my tongue and let it go. Um, because there's always going to be those kinds of hierarchical fears of speaking up for yourself. But I think as I progress over my career, I just, it got to the point where I, stop suffering fools, as they they might say, and just will speak up for myself.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I continually try to do that. And at some point, I almost find myself like, it's sort of personal, but I almost find myself like trying to convince somebody of my abilities, and I get like yucky feeling from that because I'm like, oh, why do I, why am I trying to convince them? Like, I just show them, or like, why can't I just like assume? Because my background should speak for itself, and I get frustrated about it.
I can empathize with that. I think there were moments where I felt like I needed to prove myself in some way, and you're absolutely right. That doesn't feel good, and I don't feel like it puts us at our best our best self when we're doing it either. It feels defensive. It doesn't feel it doesn't feel confident, right? Or it
Yes.
and it shows and almost reinforces some of what I think the individual you're interacting with might be, thinking or inadvertently
Yes.
conveying to you. And so I agree. I think there is that instinct, though, to be defensive, and um, it's hard, especially depending on the particulars of the situation. If someone really baits you into that, it can be challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also noticed that you said something that really struck with me, which is like you have led your technology career with your passion to be able to make access to information more equitable, which is a beautiful statement for then, moving into your role as CEO and commissioner of the city of Chicago. I feel like I don't know anything about it, but it sounds to me like it's very serendipitous. You want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I had been working in educational publishing and educational technology, and we were doing product development. And under my purview were products that were literature, language arts, theater, journalism. So you start to there, like from a content perspective, I had the background to manage that content, and then also, we were in charge of developing technology products that delivered that content in various ways, whether they were games or interactive versions of the textbooks. But we were doing K-12 publishing, and our schools across the country um, still have a lot of disparity in the levels of access. And at the time, it was much less likely that schools were wired or had wireless access. The computers that they had could have any number of capabilities at the time. So we would make products in every conceivable format. So we would produce things on CD, on DVD, and then we were moving more to online, every way, because you needed to, because it's education and you need to be able to serve everyone. You had to produce everything in all of these formats. And then, there was also a gap in the technology skills that we saw, both within our our own sometimes sales and marketing force. So we would help train our sales and marketing teams on the technology so they could feel more comfortable, because then they in turn would help train some of the teachers who were still working on building those skills as well. So there was just such disparity from an access perspective, a skills perspective, that when a job, and I started as a project manager at the city of Chicago, came up, I was really excited because the job was going to be helping to work on various projects and programs related to what was called digital excellence, or universal meaningful use of technology throughout the city. There had been a report written by the Mayor's Council on Closing the Digital Divide, which called The City That Networks, and that was published in 2007. And there was a number of recommendations, and we were going to be working on some of these great things. So it was such a great opportunity to start to think about how we could, as a city and as a community, work across sectors to improve that situation that I encountered while working in educational publishing. So that was really the entry point for the city to me, and I was able to. I mean, so I transitioned there in 2008. We had obviously a Great Recession and a big economic downturn at that time. But that also brought the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act and a lot of funds to help support work around building digital skills and providing access in communities. So I was able to, I think one of my first really I was fortunate to be able to help apply for those grants and bring, over $21 million into, some of our underserved communities to help build skills and provide access across, adults, youth, businesses. And so it was really impactful, and I really got hooked on public service through that work. Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I would love one day as well to be able to do that type of work. I think it's super meaningful, especially since I'm so local and like to be embedded in the community, to just like join the city for some tech innovation. I think it's one of my secret dreams that is not so secret anymore, I guess.
Well, I also, in addition to working at SHED, I teach a class at the University of Chicago's Harris School of Public Policy and Technology and Public Policy. And that's one of the things that I hope I do with my students, is inspire them to use their amazing skills and knowledge to work in public service, even for some period of time, because it really, there's no, while there are challenges, don't get me wrong, and you work under some serious constraints, there's, despite all of that, it is still such meaningful work, and especially at the local level, because you look outside and you see the impact of your work. I was able, starting when I was the chief technology officer, and then continuing when I became chief information officer, I worked with the Department of Transportation and the Chicago Infrastructure Trust on deploying smart lighting. So, like literally, I can look out my window and see something that I worked on, right? Because we do, not only did a LED conversion of over 270,000 lights across the city, but also included a network on top of that with the sensors to be able to automatically detect when there's problems with our lighting infrastructure. So it's just such a cool thing to be able to do, and there are very few opportunities like that.
Yes, absolutely. So. You covered, I didn't realize, tell us a little bit about what areas you covered as a CIO and commissioner, because you went from education to lighting. What else did you, I didn't realize it was like, oh my God, you mean everything technology related is under you as part of it?
Most was. So yeah, I had a few different roles while I was at the city. So I started as a project manager, and then I oversaw planning, policy, and management. So that included, tech policy, which, some of that community-based work that I talked about previously, but also had to understand when rules were being changed at the FCC that might impact our ability to,
Yes.
regulate our public way, as wireless network, technologies are being deployed across our city. Had to keep up with a number of different things on the policy side, and then also oversaw our project management office. So all of our project managers and began some work to really formalize some of our methods and processes. And then I became Chief Technology Officer and first Deputy Commissioner. And so in city speak, commissioners are basically department heads. So
Okay.
you oversee a department, and sometimes you have a different title. You might be an executive director, but at the city, department heads were always called commissioners. So I started some work as CTO, and then I became CIO in June of 2017. So and both as CTO and CIO, sort of the overarching umbrella included everything from your network and telecommunications infrastructure, information security, all of the city's enterprise applications. So that's its financial systems, its HR systems, its 311 non-emergency management system.
Yes.
So all of the major systems, and then our website, of course, geographic information systems. So we had a pretty big purview, I think. So with the exception of public safety technology, everything else sort of fell under. And then pockets of departments, they were responsible for some of their own department-specific technology. We were not necessarily a large enough team to be able to also always manage department-specific technology. And historically, technology had been very decentralized, but over time it had been more centralized. But there were still some of these pockets of decentralization that existed. But we had sort of governance oversight,
Nice.
as well. So
How,
that, yep,
yeah,
that was
how
the
large
purview.
was the team, if you like the tech org, if you want to?
Yeah, so the technology org, so while I was there, it was the Department of Innovation and Technology, and we were about 100 people.
Okay.
And so if you think about that, that's, police represents a very large number of staff, so they're like 15,000 right there. But and again, police had, and Office of Emergency Management and Communication had some purview over their own support, but we were responsible for supporting, the rest of the organization, which ended up being, around 16 to 20,000 staff members. So relatively small team ratio in comparison to the number of users. And then if you add on our constituents, right, our 2.7 million constituents and visitors on top of that, it's a small team for a large number of folks that we served.
That is, I mean, it's crazy because you serve a lot of people, but it's also like a good sized team for, like, say, I built out startups. So like I have mixed, I'm getting mixed feelings about it. I was like, that's 100 people. That I thought it was gonna be maybe smaller because of the resource. One always thinks like government resource constraint, maybe smaller. But it makes sense that it's small team for all of the people that you actually serve. Do you want to tell me like a little bit about biggest challenges of tech, whether it's from a nonprofit organization slash Chicago, maybe some of the biggest painful challenges, and then excuse me, some of the most fun problem solving challenges.
Sure. Well, I think you alluded to this earlier, and one of the reasons why I like technology so much is because you do get to learn a little bit about everything. So
Yeah.
we mentioned like and a city does a lot of different things,
Yeah.
but even coming to Shed or working in nonprofits, there are people with such deep expertise in animal care and conservation, in
Yes.
water. There's so much to continue to learn that's part of what I enjoy, the challenge of learning those things and figuring out how we can help bring technology as a tool to bear when appropriate on problems, right? Because technology is not a panacea, and I tell my students this all the time. And you're coming into a tech class, and they're telling me don't always use technology. No, sometimes a different change is actually needed. Sometimes, there's the people, process, technology pyramid, right? And sometimes, you're the opportunity you're trying to uh, you know
Resolve for, yeah.
resolve for, your problem you're trying to solve for is not necessarily going to be solved by just throwing a tool at it, right? And that leads me to the challenge side, which I see across all organizations, and that's where someone brings you a tool that's sort of in search of a problem. We need to use this. Why? What problem are we actually trying to solve here? And so you get and you get that, I think, across the board. And I have lots of great relationships with our various vendor partners, but sometimes you get vendors who will come and directly pitch to any number of people within an organization, and they get excited about this tool and its capabilities, but it all comes back to, okay, that's great, but what is the problem we're trying to solve? Because when you add a new tool, you're adding new processes, you're adding potentially, yes, support. The cost of a tool is never truly the cost of a tool. and you could be, adding new work to your teams inadvertently too, right? In a way that you need to be sure to think about. And have we vetted it for security and other important critical things? I think that getting people to understand that we really need to take deep dives, especially as we migrate more to software as a service solutions, that we need to understand that infrastructure that supports whatever that tool is, because if our data is being stored in that tool, we're still liable, right?
Yes.
We're still liable for what happens to that. And that's, again, regardless of your industry that you're working in. So we need to have processes in place to vet through things. And I think people understand those things once you explain them. And I think some of the security related issues have gotten easier to explain, because unfortunately, there is a new news story every day that,
Speaking of news stories, did you catch the one about the city emails getting leaked?
I did. Yeah.
That has been a fun story to follow. I'm sure.
Yeah, any breach of data is unfortunate, right? I recognize that wasn't the city itself being breached, and the city provides and actually e-discovery fell under the purview of my team as well, where we would actually need to cull the information that either lawyers were looking for, the inspector general, or if they were looking for emails, we were responsible for culling and then providing that back to freedom of information officers, who then were the primary interfaces to folks making FOIA requests, but of course, or to the law department, etc. So any data breach though is unfortunate, and
it happens. It happens specifically nowadays. I was wondering about what do you think about the collaboration between private tech sector and public sector tech in Chicago? And I'm asking you, like, maybe a little bit off left field, but I've always wondered do you see any opportunities for more collaboration? There's a lot of there's a good solid tech community in Chicago of talented individual contributors and companies that are being built here. And I've always wondered if and where there is opportunity of collaboration between, I don't want to leave my private tech job, but I would like to be able to contribute to public tech to make my city better and to, provide, feel good about, working for an advertisement company. I don't know.
Sure. No, I think in and while I haven't been in that role during the pandemic, I know that the private sector stepped up in a number of ways to help out, cities everywhere, right? So yes, I think there is that connectivity um, between the public sector and those corporations. I think that there's great um, efforts in the city, like with P33 or World Business Chicago and Chicago Next. I think there are some, great opportunities to continue to, through those networks, build on some of that, especially, fostering maybe smaller and startup communities, companies that are diverse companies, and the city obviously makes a point to do business with minority and women-owned businesses, but we can continue to build on those efforts. So I think by looking at and leveraging existing networks and infrastructure that have been put into place, I think it's about building on that to continue to really make that connectivity work. It can be challenging to do business with the city or with government in general. There are a lot of procurement rules in place, and they're there for good reasons, right?
Mm.
Unfortunately, at some point, there were bad actors that didn't follow rules, or gave a contract to a company they shouldn't, and so therefore there are a number of rules in place, and it gets even more complicated once you get to the federal level, and it's like 1,000 pages of rules, but they're there for good reason, but it can be really intimidating for smaller businesses in particular to go through those processes. So I think that we need to continue to work on ways to make it easier for newer and smaller businesses to continue to contribute to their communities and work with the public sector. And so, some of that is outreach, but some of it's also looking at policies and processes and ways to remove some of the barriers to entry for those organizations so that they can, bring their tools and expertise to bear on meaningful challenges. So yeah, I'm hopeful that there are people who recognize that. I see that again in my students, and that over time, hopefully, we'll see some positive momentum, build in the right direction.
Yeah, that is like absolutely. I'm hoping as well. Like I used to follow, and not to harp too much on this. If you want to move on to something else, but I used to follow a little bit more of like some of the projects that the city did have with citizens building solutions. I think there was a CTA challenge at some point. I remember a few years back, and at the same time, it's really hard to engage from my perspective, from a private sector or individual person doing tech with the city tech as well. So I wish there were more opportunities to really like spill the private sector knowledge into the public and vice versa, so that we could really create something beautiful that is um that it's tech Chicago overall.
I agree. I think that hopefully, once we get past the pandemic, there'll be some good opportunities to focus in on some of those types of initiatives again, because I know, this has been a challenging year for lots of people and businesses and governments across the board. So I think that that's, there's some real opportunities to be able to build some less formal groups and even meetups and ways to sort of engage. We do have in Chicago a group called Shy Hack Night that meets every week, and I think they're very that group is very engaged, but
Yeah.
there may be other ways that people want to engage, and so I know I was just talking with the CIO of Aurora, Illinois, and they've started an AI meetup group to specifically talk about the use of artificial intelligence in Aurora and help build skills and think about. And so, having, groups that kind of come together around
Yes.
topics of interest that, come up organically can be, if you've got people who are really interested and are committed to making those things work, and they do come up from the grassroots and organic, I think they can, like Shy Hack Night, be really important and meeting places for public sector to come together with people like yourself who are interested in sort of making a difference in your community and bringing your technology skills to bear in that respect.
Nice, beautiful. Yes, shout out to Chai Hack Night because it's been going on for years and they deliver really good meetings and content. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google Chai Hack Night and the meeting will come up. Danielle, we're getting close to the finish line here, but I want to know, as a technology leader now, as a woman who has a seat at the table, any lessons you would like to impart to our audience, and it could be from your perspective as a woman, or it could be from your leadership perspective, from your professional experience. You got a couple of things that maybe you keep in mind and continue to repeat to yourself, or another perspective, just to give you a little bit more time to brainstorm, could be something that you would tell your younger self as she was growing up the ranks of tech.
Well, so a couple of lessons learned that come to mind is that I think I've learned over time is that it is important to deliver sort of consistently and meaningfully, but that there are a lot of really complex problems, especially when you're working in communities, and those complex challenges take time to solve, right? They span administrations, and sort of the importance of having some continuity in the public sector and sort of your rank and file staff, right?
Yes.
There's always going to be that leadership level change, but having some of that continuity, people who continue to work through these challenges and problems, because it takes time, and that's so antithetical to everything that I think,
technology.
Yes, it is. It is antithetical, and so to get people to understand that it can be challenging, but it really, it's true. It's about making continuous improvement, and that idea of always leaving it a little bit better than it was before, because especially in either organizations that are less resourced, or you need to sometimes take more time to really deliver on a solution. So that's one. And then if change from the top if it's top down, it's not going to necessarily always be successful and persisting. And I think I learned that from, working with community organizers early on in my time at the city, and that you really need, it can be okay to come together, to have some top down and some bottom up, but you need that, right? You need to have that balance. And that is true, I think, with any kind of project that you're going to execute one way or the other, whether it's in your community or in your organization. To really get meaningful change and persist, you need to have a good combination of that bottom up. And then I I think just as a reminder to myself to probably just remember that, to tell myself that you're doing your best every day, right? That best may not be the same because of life, but you're doing your best every day, because I know I can be particularly hard on myself.
Yes.
And when you feel that sometimes your abilities are being questioned, that can make that kind of characteristic all the more challenging. So it's that reminder to be kind, to continue to be sort of tenacious, to be open to criticism, not to internalize it, and just make little improvements in your community every day, right? That is what you can do.
Yeah, give yourself some slack and keep moving on, and Listen.
Listen, yes, listen, active listening, yes,
Listen
absolutely.
to yourself, sometimes listen to others too. And just really like, I like that. I am practicing on my being kind, and it's been a very, very, very nice journey. So I'm excited that other people are thinking about it that way too.
That's great.
I'm not alone.
No, you're absolutely not. I think that's what you start to realize is there's more of us who are hard on our like a little probably too hard on ourselves than we should be sometimes, and that
Absolutely.
that doesn't energize us to do
Yeah.
good work, right?
Yeah.
So we have to figure out how to accept that, like how to accept constructive criticism and think about what can be actionable, and so that you can get past that and then yes, feel empowered to do good work again.
Oh, beautiful. I think this is a great way to get into the final few questions. And I think I may throw you in for a loop here because I want to ask you something a little bit different. But what is maybe something funny or special that we don't know about you?
I don't know if it's funny but I mean it's
Interesting.
yeah, I
Fun
guess
fact.
yeah, I do like making things. And so, when I do have time, I like to be crafty.
Yeah.
It's I
Like
find it
like tables
centering.
or like knitting? Like which
Well, so I do a lot of sewing or like crafts with felt, like
okay.
so, and then the one thing I did finally do over the pandemic was learn how to crochet. My mom and my aunt are like incredibly artistic and really adept at a lot of crafts, and I had been, she had bought me some crochet, like a book and some yarn and the needles, and it had just been sitting there, and I finally picked them up, and so I've really enjoyed learning to crochet, and I got to make something practical and give gifts to my friends. So it's
Nice.
you get I think joy out of doing that, and I find it also just a very centering activity to
Yes.
do. I think I have a tendency, it keeps you busy without being busy, because I think I have that tendency to feel like I'm doing something all of the time, and so
Yes. I
but
was
you
like, are we
can.
twins? Yes, same here. I do puzzles. That's my way of channeling. And Sudoku. Apparently, tons of Sudoku.
And I think crosswords, right? You also like
I
crosswords?
am a
Yeah.
cruciverbalist. Yes,
Yes.
I'm a little bit obsessed. And I do them in 3 languages, which is even better challenge.
That's
I
super
realize
impressive.
I realize my vocabulary where it lacks, and then I'm like, oh shit, I need to fill in the gap. Um, what is a book you have gifted the most?
Oh, okay, I've gifted the most. I should
Or
know this one.
or like a resource that you go to, something that something that I love reading, so I always ask about book recommendations.
Oh, okay. Well, if we're gonna just do recommendations, let's see. I feel like I can do. I do have a tendency. I really like a lot of British authors.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Go figure. But let's see. So some of my favorites are Iris Murdoch and A.S. Byatt and Julian Barnes, and I also love E.M. Forster.
Okay.
I have a lot of like
I I don't know.
British, yeah,
I don't know
an
anything about
Anglophile
this.
as it comes to literature.
Yeah.
Um,
Is it novels? Is it modern?
yeah,
Is
yeah,
it
novels. They're mostly novels. I love novels. I think that those are, uh, when I really want to, dig in and read. That's always my go-to. But I also, and I've been reading a ton of French. Who's a mystery writer too.
okay?
I really, I think she's American, but she's lived in Ireland for a long time. So again, they're like mostly set in Ireland. So there's a theme here. Um, Yeah, that's just a few things. But one of my favorite books is actually A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's
Yes,
not very long.
yeah.
The film
It's
version,
very popular. Yeah.
is really good too. The Merchant and Ivory adaptations of the
Yes.
E.M. Forster works are really good. But yeah, I love sort of the characters of Lucy and George, and that book, and um, yeah, just how they embrace life, and yeah, it's just one of my favorites. So.
Nice, nice. What is a book you would write?
Well, that's a great question.
Are you
If
writing
you
a
would have
book?
asked me this a long time ago, it probably would have been a book of poetry or a book of short stories, right?
Nice.
But at this point in my life, it probably would be a book about working in the public sector technology, just like the class I teach.
Nice. Yeah. Can you think of a title real quick? Is it like how to implement change? Would it be about
That's a good
change
one.
or about? I need to come audit your class. I need
Yeah, so the name of
to.
my class is building engaged and connected communities.
Nice.
So
So something around that.
yeah, something around that exactly. And
Perfect.
yeah, so
Nice. Okay. And where do we find you? Or do we find Shadow? Just recently opened, like you said earlier. How do people buy tickets nowadays? Is there a reservation in process? Tell me about it.
yeah, so if you visit shedaquarium.org, you can purchase tickets online. So we have timed entry, and as I mentioned earlier, we have stringent safety measures in place, so that our guests can enjoy a safe and fun visit. You can purchase a ticket to come on site. You can purchase a ticket for a virtual encounter, a membership, or donate to help us continue to serve on our mission of sparking compassion, curiosity, and conservation for the aquatic world. And it also helps to offset some of the financial impacts of COVID-19 on SHED.
Amazing. I've been to Shed once, and I'm trying to get my girls back there, and I can't wait. I can't
Oh,
wait.
well, I'm excited for you to come. Yes, it'll be
I'm gonna go
great
this
to see
time
you
slot.
there. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you for having this conversation and staying connected to the community. Thank you for being a woman in tech and keeping the good work and the hard work and being a representation of hopefully other aspiring women that would also want to be in tech one day.
Thank you, and likewise, and it's great that you take the time to tell all of these stories. So I really
So,
appreciate that because it's important, right?
absolutely.
One if I could go out on the one of those things, the lessons learned is
Yes.
how important it is to communicate, right? We get so
Yes.
busy actually doing the work sometimes that we forget to talk about it, because
Mhm.
talking about it is more important than we realize, right?
Absolutely. And women in Chicago, we don't talk enough about it. So that's why
We're
I'm
very
talking
productive.
about
We need to talk more.
it. Thank you so much, Danielle. It's been a great pleasure. I hope to see you back.
Thanks.